Hello everybody, I'm Miss Jessica from EVPL McCullough, and we are continuing our Chapter Book Storytime Variety Pack. And we have been reading just a little bit of a book so that you can be introduced to all of our amazing titles. And then if it's something that gets your curiosity going and you want to continue the story, we have lots of ways for you to do that. Quick note before we get started, my allergies are definitely bothering me, so I do have a cough drop, and then I also have something to drink nearby just in case. And our topic today, when we spun our wheel last time, is spooky. So I've definitely got my snuggly blanket to kind of help set the mood with our spooky story. So our title that we're going to be reading is School of the Dead by Avi. Now, I will tell you that Avi is a Newbery Medal Award winner and also has some honor books. So this author is definitely somebody that I have been following for years. And I've always liked this title just because it's got my curiosity going as to what does that even mean? So when our spooky topic came up, I was very excited that I had a chance to grab this book. And just as a quick side note, the book that we read last time for our spooky titles by Victoria Schwab, and of course now I'm totally drawing a blank. Let me look really quick. It was City of Ghosts. I will tell you that after we read that, I loved that book so much that I kept reading and read through the entire series in a matter of weeks. So I definitely love spooky books, and that was one of my favorites. So hopefully this book will get our curiosity going as well. So let's read the inside cover. Actually, before I do that, I do want to say that this book came out in 2016. We do have it as an ebook and an e-audiobook, so if there's a way that you would prefer to read it digitally, you can, or listen to it. And then we also have lots of print copies. Okay, so the inside cover says, Tony has never believed in ghosts until now. Everybody has a weird uncle. No big deal. That Tony Gilbert's great uncle, Charlie, is a bit weird. That is, until he moves in with Tony and his family. Sure, Uncle Charlie is strange, constantly talking about ghosts and spirits, but Tony considers him just an oddball. And anyway, he is fun. The two become best friends. So when Uncle Charlie dies, Tony is beside himself. Tony also has to deal with moving across the country to San Francisco with his family. That was Uncle Charlie's idea, so that Tony can enroll in the Penda School, a private institution that Uncle Charlie attended as a child. Only now, Uncle Charlie will not be around to help Tony adjust. But Uncle Charlie is around. Tony sees him on the street, in his room, and even at his new school. Could it be the ghost of Uncle Charlie? Does it mean that all of Uncle Charlie's tales about communicating with the dead might actually be true? If they are, what is Uncle Charlie trying to tell him or do with him? Ooh, already I'm in. Okay, now something interesting about this book is that it doesn't have any chapters. The entire book is just a long story. So every once in a while, you will get these breaks. So it kind of designates a new scene. So there's one, there's another one. So we get these big spaces. So we don't have a chapter that we will stop on, but I will note the page number in case you would like to keep going. But yeah, that's one of kind of those interesting things. I always love how authors do different things and have different preferences about how they tell their story. So this is just one of those quirky things that this book does not have chapters. All right, so here we go. The first time Uncle Charlie came to live with us, he was alive. The second time he came, he was dead. Uncle Charlie was my mother's uncle, an 80-something bachelor who I saw only at Baltimore family gatherings. Thanksgiving, Christmas, and Easter. The men wore suits, button-down shirts, and ties. Uncle Charlie always came wearing a frayed checkered shirt, red suspenders, khakis, and worn loafers with tassels. What's more, his clothing was generally rumpled and not very clean. A small guy with a lean face, pug nose, and gloomy eyes. He didn't exactly party. More often than not, he sat alone in a corner listening intently to the chatter while clasping and unclasping his small, bony hands, but not saying much. When people asked him how he was doing, he'd talk vaguely about some group he just joined or some strange book he'd recently read, like Anglo-Saxon Magic or The Egyptian Art of Death. People tended to leave him alone. When he did not show up at these outings, I'd hear adults saying, "Any news about Uncle Charlie?" "Don't ask," was the usual reply, with a shaking of heads, smirks, and eye rolling. In other words, compared to the rest of my family, Uncle Charlie was different. Maybe that's why I always sensed there was stuff going on inside him, locked up, secretive stuff. Not that I ever saw him do anything unusual. Though my cousins and I kept our distance, at some point one of us would usually whisper, "What's the deal with Uncle Charlie?" Took a while, but I found out. It all began during a family Christmas gathering. After the big dinner with people hanging around doing not much, I noticed Uncle Charlie was, as usual, sitting by himself. Except he was staring at me. I had no idea why. Then I realized he was beckoning me over. Puzzled, we very rarely talked, I went up to him. At first, all he did was gaze intently at me with unhappy eyes until, in a croaky voice, he said, "You're Tony, right? Elle's son." "Uh-huh." "Glad to see you." He held out a small hand, the narrow fingers crooked and sort of claw-like. Not knowing what else to do, I shook. He was kind of weak. "What grade are you in?" he asked. "Sixth." "Perfect," he said, some light coming to his eyes along with a sly smile. Not only was it rare for Uncle Charlie to smile, but this was an "I know something you don't know" smile. Having no idea what it meant or how to respond, I backed away. Even so, during the next few hours, he kept glancing at me. It made me uncomfortable. Why should Uncle Charlie care about me? It was during our long drive back home to Connecticut that I said to my parents, "How come Uncle Charlie is so weird?" Dad snorted. "Every family has at least one weird uncle." My parents exchanged looks, and then Mom said, "You might as well know. He's moving in with us." "You're kidding! Uncle Charlie? Why?" Mom said, "He lost his apartment. His health is poor. He has a heart problem, and he's old. He needs to be with family." "What happened to his apartment?" "Evicted," Dad said. Mom shot a sharp look at Dad as if to say, "You weren't supposed to say that." But I caught it and said, "How come he was evicted?" Dad warned and said only, "It's not clear." "Okay, but why is he coming to us?" "We had a family meeting," Mom explained. Your uncles, aunts, adult cousins. Since your dad and I have jobs that keep us late so often, meaning you're home so much alone, the idea is that it might be good for you and him if he moved in with us." Dad said, "We do have that spare bedroom at the back of our house." Mom added, "He's actually fairly well off, has his own car and health insurance. To be brutally honest, Tony, I don't think Uncle Charlie has long to live. That heart, the main point, he is family. Inviting him to move in is the decent thing to do. It's hard to be old and facing death alone." I worried about what it was going to be like having Uncle Charlie live with us. Would I have to take care of him? Why had he been so curious about me? What was that secretive smile all about? And what was it like for him to be facing death? A couple of weeks later, Uncle Charlie moved in. Now, I have to admit that once Uncle Charlie was around, my feelings about him changed because he had changed. He was clean, neat, wore regular clothing. He smiled, had energy, and was happy to talk about lots of things, interesting things. I did not have to take care of him. Just the opposite. Within a month of his coming, I stopped minding that my parents worked late so often. When it happened, I went to Uncle Charlie for what I needed. Driving me places, getting things. I listened to his stories and his jokes, which he told a lot. I got the dinners I wanted. Mac and cheese, pizza, hamburgers, fries, ice cream. If I needed advice, school, friends, Uncle Charlie gave it. In other words, he turned out to be a cool guy. Of course, sometimes when we'd go somewhere, he'd suddenly stand very still and gasp, "Hold it," trying to catch his breath. When he finally did, he'd just grin and say, "Not dead yet." When I asked him, "Uncle Charlie, how come you're so different from the way you used to be?" "Tony," he said, "it meant a lot that your folks invited me here. At my age, it isn't fun being alone. But you know what the best thing about living here is? You. I love being with kids, most of all. For an old guy like me, it's like having a new life." Okay, life. But the thing was, it hadn't taken long for me to realize that it wasn't this life that interested Uncle Charlie. What fascinated him was the next life, what he called the other side. As we got to know each other, Uncle Charlie told me wild stories about things that had happened to him, stories not even my mom, his niece, knew. How he had traveled to out-of-the-way places like Nepal, Tasmania, and where he'd had bizarre adventures living with mystics. Excuse me, cough. Living with mystics and shamans. He told me about near-death experiences, talking to spirits. Of course, he added, things can get a bit out of control. Neighbors complain. "Is that how come you got evicted?" "Who told you about that?" he asked, slipping in that sly smile of his. I grinned. "Oh," he said, "some friends and I were trying to talk to the other side. Our meeting became a little, what do you kids say? Rowdy. No big deal. If there was one thing I hated in this world, it was fake. High on my hate list were adults who faked enjoy doing kid stuff. But Uncle Charlie loved kid stuff. He and I spent hours playing video games filled with wizards, vampires, and warlocks. We watched TV shows filled about ghosts and phantoms. He read me spooky stories by Poe, Stevenson, and Lovecraft, his croaky voice making them really eerie. When I got home from school, we might even go to the shabby theater he'd somehow discovered, which showed old black and white movies about the supernatural like Night of the Living Dead. After those films, we'd go to what became Uncle Charlie's favorite store, the Witch's Basement. I had no idea how he found it, but the store was packed with fantasy books, games, and costumes. Halloween every day of the year. It was fun. One day, Uncle Charlie said, "Tony, when I die, I really want you to join me." His eyes brightened when he said it, and he had that sly look I'd come to love, which I took to mean he was just joking. Without much thought, I said, "Sure." In fact, the more he talked about ghosts and supernatural stuff, the more ordinary they seemed. For instance, when my friends came around, Uncle Charlie asked them about their relatives, if they were about to die or if they had died, how and when, natural causes or accidents. "How come he talks about death all the time?" my friend Mike asked. "It's odd." "He knows that he's going to die soon," I told Mike. "So he likes to joke that he's going to move somewhere else." I told Uncle Charlie, "Mike thinks you're odd." Uncle Charlie laughed and said, "He's right, but I never get even. I get older." That made me laugh. Then my friend Bill came over, and when Uncle Charlie learned that Bill's aunt had recently died, he decided we should go to the other side and talk to her spirit. He darkened his room, burned incense, played eerie music, made us hold hands, and spoke strange words. In the middle of it, Uncle Charlie got all gaspy and out of breath. It was as bad as if he was really about to go to the other side right then. So, of course, we never talked to Bill's aunt. Even so, Mom got a call from Bill's mother. "Tony's great uncle," she said, "really upset Bill by trying to talk to his late aunt." I heard Mom, who knew nothing about it, say, My old Uncle Charlie is with us because he has health problems. The good thing is, with my husband and my work schedules, he does look after Tony, and Tony really enjoys his company. Trouble was, Bill and Mike, the other friends, stopped coming over because of Uncle Charlie. They said he was too creepy. When I told my friends about things he'd done, they started calling me weirdo. Hating that, I hung out just with Uncle Charlie more than ever. In April, when I turned 12, Uncle Charlie gave me the coolest birthday present, a red Gibbon slackline. A slackline is a nylon tape, 2 inches wide, stretched some distance, not quite like a tightrope, but bowed. You get on it, not easy, and set one foot before the other. You stand on it, trying to keep your balance, swaying, adjusting, and trying to find your center. Then you try to move forward or back if you can. He also gave me a book called Walk the Line. On the first page it read, "Warning, take your own actions as they pertain to take responsibility for your own actions as they pertain to slackline. Slackline can be dangerous, resulting in injury or possibly death." The guy who wrote the book, Scott Balcom, did some insane walks across canyons, so I guess he knew what he was talking about. My parents would never have given me a slackline, too risky. Uncle Charlie was enthusiastic. When you walk the slackline, you're not in the air, you're not on the ground. Sort of half alive, half dead. Good practice for being a ghost. I said, "I don't believe in ghosts." He laughed. "You will someday." Someday? When people say someday, it's like making a wish. All I can say is that when I was on the slack line, I didn't think about ghosts. I just loved trying to walk it. That's kind of a creepy phrase, though, for his uncle to say. After Uncle Charlie had been living with us for a few months, he came up with a huge idea. We would all move to San Francisco, where he grew up. Seems he wanted me to go to the Penda School, a private K-8 school he went to when he was a kid. "Tony will get a better education than he gets here," he told us. My parents, who had become bored with their jobs, Mom in marketing, Dad a civil engineer, talked about moving. Dad said, "Who wouldn't want to live in San Francisco?" And Mom wanted more challenging work. I reminded them that I stopped liking my school, and Uncle Charlie kept talking about how great the Penda School was. In the end, my folks decided that if they found better positions out there, we would go. It took a while, but then they announced that both of them had landed great jobs, and in San Francisco, we would move early October. Uncle Charlie was thrilled. "Now," he said, "we just have to get you into Penda." Mom got in touch with the Penda School only to be told that it was full. Still, they said I'd be waitlisted because there could always be a change. Wanting to get to a place where I could make new friends, I was disappointed. Dad said, "I'm sure San Francisco has a lot of good schools." And Uncle Charlie, sly smile in place, said, "Maybe I can help." The very next night, my folks were working late again. Uncle Charlie said something new to me. "Know why I was willing to move in here?" "So you wouldn't be alone?" "Nope. I wanted to get to know you. And because I wanted you to go to the Penda School." "What's so special about it?" He thought a moment and then said, "Kindergarten to 8th grade. And that's it. Full of life." I thought of asking him, which life? This one or the next? I didn't. I should have. 2 weeks after my parents decided we would all move to San Francisco, Uncle Charlie became ill, feverish, weak, numbness in his hands. So right after school, I would zip on home, measure out his meds, do his errands, and sometimes feed him. I even helped him get into his blue pajamas and into bed in his room. Then this awful thing happened. It was a warm night in June. My folks were working late, so I was alone with Uncle Charlie, telling me he had painful tightness in his chest and a general chill. He took to bed. I sat in a chair by his side. After a while, the book he had been reading, Cults of the Caribbean, fell to the floor. Gradually, his eyes closed. Not sure if he was sleeping, I stayed put. The increasing humidity made my skin feel crawly. Outside, the wind began to whip and whistle. Treetops started to sway. The air became heavy, the room dim, window curtains fluttered. I fell into a doze, only to be awakened with a start. Uncle Charlie had reached out and gripped my hand with his skinny fingers. "Hey, Tony," he whispered in that cloggy voice of his. I looked around. "Have I convinced you that ghosts are real?" he rasped. I muttered, "Not really." "They are," he said. "Believe me." "I do," I said for his sake, while letting him cling to my hand. He was trembling. Loud thunder drew near. Rain tapped the side of the house, sounding like tiny feet running up and down the walls. The air in the room began to swirl in slow circles. Uncle Charlie had been lying very still, then his grip on my hand tightened. "Tony, I'm going to die." Scared, having no idea what to do or say, I just mumbled, "Hope not." "How about coming with me to the other side?" "What?" He shifted his head slightly so he could look at me. For a second, his eyes brightened. "Know what Albert Einstein said?" I shook my head. "The distinction between past and present and future is only an illusion." "I don't get it." "Remember the number 7. "What about 7? "The most important number in the universe. Means there's a way you and I can stay together. When I go, I really want you to join me. It's not that hard to do. Just respect the past and protect the future." Sure, he was becoming confused. All I said was, "If you say so." "Tony," he went on, his voice weaker, "your 7th grade year is going to be big." He gave my hand another squeeze, sighed deeply, sort of a raspy hiss, and then he said, "Here we go. Trust me." His small bony hand continued to hold on, and his eyes remained open, as if watching me. But he died. Outside, the storm erupted. Being alone when Uncle Charlie died was ghastly. The burial service on a hot and humid day was almost as bad. It was held in a funeral parlor with fake wood-paneled walls and piped-in gooey organ music that a snail would have found slow. Since the cooling system was busted, the air reeked with something that smelled like burnt sugar. Meant to hide, I was sure, the stink of death. The quiet was so deep, I kept hearing the prickly rustle of clothing, the shifting of feet, the clearing of throats. It made my skin crawl. There was a long sermon preached by an old minister friend of Uncle Charlie's, something sappy about souls set free to wander. The worst was seeing Uncle Charlie in an open casket, looking like a wax doll with rouged cheeks. The undertakers had closed his eyes, which had been so full of fun. As far as I was concerned, I had lost my best friend. Uncle Charlie was buried in a local cemetery, the muddle of crosses looking like a forest of crooked trees. When we reached the open grave, it even began to rain. 2 shaggy-haired gravediggers stood off to one side, leaning on their spades. They were wearing red gloves. Uncle Charlie was the first person I really knew who passed on. I understood nothing about death, hadn't really thought about it, much less gotten it. All I knew was that was when when his casket was lowered into the grave, it felt as if a part of me was buried too. All right, there's one more last part and then we're gonna stop there. Weeks went by. Despite all Uncle Charlie's jokey talk of ghosts, the supernatural, and the other side, I wasn't prepared for his death. Moreover, the summer was hot and humid and I had lost my friends. I felt abandoned, sort of like wandering in a fog. With my folks still at their old jobs, I was alone tons of time. I spent hours walking my red slackline, which was hooked up in our backyard. Mom did not approve. "It's vacation time. You should be out playing and doing things with kids, not staying home by yourself like a circus performer with no audience." But walking the line made me feel good. It was my way of keeping Uncle Charlie's memory alive. All right, so we're gonna stop there. So we just finished page 15 and we're about to start at the top of page 16. And again, because there's no chapters, that's the only way I can tell you where we've left off, so that if you are interested in continuing the story, then you can pick up there. So we haven't even gotten to the part where he goes to this school. And I don't know about you, but his uncle, I'm sure he was a very nice person. He loved him very much, but he was also kind of creepy, especially the way he talked about going in between the world of the living and the world of the dead. So I kind of wonder what's going to happen when he gets to this school, just because, as we know from the inside of the cover, that his uncle does start showing up in his life. So I have a lot of questions. And because I love spooky books, and this is considered a ghost story when it's described, then I will definitely keep reading. So if you would like to also, you are able to go to our website to put a hold on it, where you can pick it up at any of our locations. You can check which location it's available at to get it, or you can always give us a call and we would be happy to help you with finding a copy. Okay, so we're gonna pause there and see what we're reading next time. All right, so we have our wheel that's going to help us decide what type of book we're going to be reading next time. So we just did spooky, we have mystery, realistic fiction, adventure, science fiction, historical fiction, humor, fantasy, and then back to spooky. So again, if we land on something that we have read recently, I will probably spin it again just so that we can get some variety. That's the whole point. And some of these we haven't had in a while, so let's see what we get. Oh, we just had historical fiction not that long ago, so I'm gonna spin it again. We really just had humor. Oh my goodness, this wheel. Ooh, science fiction. All right, so next time we're together, we're going to be reading a science fiction book. I don't think we've had one of those in a while, so that's really exciting to have something new. So thank you again for joining me today for our chapter book story time. We're here every Friday, and if you are interested in seeing what else we have to offer, go to our website, EVPL.org, and you can see everything that we are offering, whether it's the materials that we have for you to check out, or also the programs that we've got, whether they are virtual and other things that you can do from home. So thank you for joining me. Go to our social media, like and subscribe to see anytime we post something new, so you'll be notified immediately. And I hope to see you again next Friday. So thanks again. Bye.